On Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin flexed his muscles. He used his pen to sign a law that made Russia's takeover of the former Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea official. But Putin's move is just the latest act of defiance toward the West. Signs that he marches to the beat of his own drum have been there for years. September 1999. After months of clashes along Chechnya's border with Dagestan, then Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin spearheads a campaign against Chechen separatists, with Russian forces invading Chechnya in October, forcing thousands of Chechens to flee their homes. Meanwhile, concern grows from human rights groups amid allegations of rape, torture, and murder by Russian soldiers. Under now President Putin's watch, the conflict peaks in late 2002 when 50 armed Chechen rebels take over a Moscow theater, holding hundreds hostage. 4 days into the siege, Russian forces storm the theater, killing most of the rebels along with 130 of the hostages. 4 years later, Russia is at odds with Belarus over a pipeline, temporarily cutting off oil after a dispute over attacks and siphoning allegations. August 2008, Russia embroiled in a 5-day war with neighboring Georgia over the territories of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. After months of tension in the region, Georgia strikes first, attacking South Ossetia. Russia counters, throwing its troops into the fight. An internationally brokered ceasefire halts the fighting, but Russian forces remain in buffer zones outside the disputed regions. 2014, after months of political unrest in Ukraine, on March 1st, Russia announces plans to use force to protect its interest in Ukraine and takes control of Crimea. 15 days later, results from Crimea's secession referendum are in. 97% of voters back a proposal to join Russia. The European Union and the U.S. retaliate with sanctions.
We've been working closely with our European partners to develop more severe actions.
But that doesn't stop Vladimir Putin from signing a bill to annex Crimea as part of the Russian Federation. Joining me now is former U.S. spokesman at the United Nations and a Fox News contributor, Richard Grenell, and former commander of the NATO Allied Air Command headquarters and retired Air Force General, Ralph Jodice. Good to have both of you gentlemen here. Rick, I want to start with you. It looks like, I mean, we've just seen from the piece, there were all kinds of signs of what kind of mindset that Putin has. Should this have, in any way, been something that the Obama administration could have almost seen coming?
Yeah, first of all, Governor, you and your team did a great job of that setup. And as you can tell, that it has been growing. It's been a growing concern. My issue is that last fall, November, is when we really saw President Yanukovych turn away from the EU, canceling many of the trade pacts with the EU that he had said that he would continue on, and accept an aid package from Russia. That was the time when we really should have had diplomacy with muscle. That's when we should have really doubled down on this debate to say, you know, are we going to have a country that's going to look towards free markets and capitalism and human rights, or are we going to turn away to the Russian style and the Russian alternative?
General, talking about the use of muscular diplomacy, one of the areas of muscle that the president has taken off the table, military force. He's already announced there won't be any. I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody. But do you think that's a smart thing for the commander-in-chief of America's military forces to say, well, we may do a lot of things, but military is not one of them? Is that an invitation for Putin to keep pushing further?
Governor, as we know, when we deal with any type of a international situation or a crisis similar to this, we as a nation must use all instruments of our national power across the dime, that dime being diplomatic, information, military, and economic. And it's clear that we've taken some of those military options off the table. We probably have showed our cards too soon. And if we want to maintain credibility, both quantitative and qualitative credibility across the board, we have to synchronize all elements of that dime. We have to synchronize the diplomatic, the information, the military, and the economic. And when we do that, we'll have a much more synergistic effect to be able to achieve the goals and objectives that we need.
Would there have been a viable NATO military option had the president not taken the U.S. out of that picture?
Sir, Governor, I think that NATO has done a few things already. We've beefed up our air policing mission, which takes place over the Baltic nations. The United States right now is exercising with flying operations inside Poland. We have airborne early warning and control aircraft, command and controls aircraft over the eastern skies of Europe, keeping an eye on Ukraine. There's other things that we can do also, I believe. I believe that the strategic placement of maybe a few ships in the Mediterranean or even a key port visit into one of our allies' ports in the Black Sea or other exercises that could take place in other partners or allied nations could send a strong signal that we still mean business.
You know, it's a fascinating thing because we've staged all of this military hardware, and yet we've already announced we're not going to use it, so it looks like it's just all for show. Appreciate that insight. President Obama did dismiss Mitt Romney when Romney raised some red flags over Putin in 2012. I'm wondering, maybe we should have taken Romney's comments a little more seriously. We'll talk about that with our panel when we return. Stay with us. During one of their presidential debates in October of 2012, Barack Obama mocked Republican nominee Mitt Romney's concern over Russia's threat.
When you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, you know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
Russia, I indicated, is a geopolitical foe. Not a,
Number one,
excuse me, it's a geopolitical foe. And I said in the same paragraph, I said, and Iran is the greatest national security threat we face. Russia does continue to battle us in the UN time and time again. I have clear eyes on this. I'm not going to wear rose-colored glasses when it comes to Russia or Mr. Putin.
Rick Grenell, you were Romney's national security and foreign policy advisor during the campaign. Looking back, was Mitt Romney maybe a little bit more the prophet and not just the presidential candidate?
Yeah, I mean, Governor Romney was exactly right on this, and I think what we saw is the political media that were covering the elections really just jumped, and they didn't get the nuance between geopolitical and the other threat. And so I think the lesson that we've learned is we really have to let foreign policy reporters report on these different types of issues, not the political reporters. But when Governor Romney was trying to signal the fact that there was a growing threat from Russia, that they were on the offense, I think it should have been taken more seriously by the president. What we're now seeing is that President Putin clearly saw an opening from a withdrawn Obama, from a withdrawn White House and a withdrawn U.S. And there's no question that the Russians wanted to jump in and fill that void with their offense and with their arguments for their way of life. And I think that debate is really important.
General Jodice, we're watching Putin move troops into the eastern part of Ukraine. We've seen what he's done in Crimea. How concerned should we be that he's going to continue the expansion until somebody just tells him that he cannot do it anymore?
Well, Governor, it's clear that Mr. Putin has an agenda here. He's looked at the political landscape, the geopolitical landscape in Europe. He's looked at the geopolitical landscape in places like Afghanistan, our focus on Afghanistan, and rightfully so. Is things that we've done and not done with regards to Syria and in other places of the world. And he sees that now, at this time, as his nation is coming off of a post-Olympic high, he has this opportunity to try to exercise his influence in what he says are former Russian territories. One
final thought, General. He got a 97% vote for approval to put Crimea into Russia. You know, you look at results like that, I know one thing, I'd love to have had a 97% vote in my political career. Is that a legitimate election? Can you really look at that and say, yeah, 97% of the people actually wanted that to happen?
Governor, in my 3.5 years of experience as a NATO commander, I had the distinct privilege and honor to lead NATO airmen and NATO forces in peacetime and in combat. And I interacted on a routine basis with many of their senior military leaders across the alliance. And of the 28 nations of the NATO alliance, 12 of them are former Eastern Bloc nations. And when you speak with the senior military leaders of those former Eastern Bloc nations and you ask them, what was it like underneath the Soviet rule? What were you waiting for? All of them will tell you that they were waiting for the United States to come, the United States and NATO, to come and liberate them and to set them free. And nearly 25 years ago, we did that. Those nations now enjoy free market economies, freedom of elections, and in my opinion, there's no way they want to go back to that old Russian rule.
Very interesting insight. General, thank you. Rick, great to have you here. Appreciate both of you very, very much.
Thanks.